Let's now take a look at an example of planning statements. Here we have a set of planning statements that are designed to address a mission of market analysis. Notice that we also have, following that mission, we have a goal, objective, a strategy, and an insight. If we look at the goal and just click on it here, you'll see a definition of what, or a detailed description of what the goal is, referring to it as consumer analysis. Notice also that this goal is actually linked to a couple of functions called market analysis and consumer analysis. These functions are defined elsewhere in the repository. The most important point is that the goal is linked to these particular functions. And you'll see that if we click on, for example, strategy, the same comes up with this detailed description of the strategy. In this case, we want to align the product promotions to the consumer behavior. And that particular strategy also may be linked to different objects. Most importantly is the insight. The insight is the data that we get from our self-service data discovery that informs the strategy. If we click on the insight, it's to identify which promotions are the most effective. You'll see a detailed description of the type of query that will run to get that data. And also you'll see a link to the entity that's involved in giving us that information. In this case, it's linked to something called promotions. Now, if we exit out of that, there's one other point that I'd like to show you, and that is that these particular planning statements can be defined and set up by you ahead of time when you first create your project. And you can do so by clicking on planning statement types. So each planning statement has a type that you can assign to it. And it also has the ability to take that type and define it as a composite type, which means then that it can be linked to any particular object in your project, and to define the cardinality of that linkage, meaning that it can be linked to only one and one only object, or it can be linked to many objects. In this case, we have a business rule that has a cardinality of many to many, meaning that there are many business rules that can actually be linked to many other objects in your project.